Hey guys, I'm here to read chapters 20 through 22. So we're going to do it in 3 chapters this time as opposed to 2. All right? Chapter 20, Freak the Mighty strikes again. Even a total goon like me knows you can't stop Killer Kane, but I go ahead and try anyhow. My hands are still numbed out and I can hardly walk, so all I can do is sort of fall on top of him and try to shove him loose from her. I'm going, "Stop! I see you! I see you! Daddy, please, please stop! You're killing her!" He just twitches me away. He's made of iron and steel, and he's gritting his teeth and squeezing her neck. You can see the whites of her eyes, and she's not even trying to get away anymore. I'm trying to get between them, and I'm going, "I saw you kill her! I saw you kill Mom! I never forgot, not ever! I know you did it! I know!" It's like I'm trapped underwater or something, so weak and floaty I can hardly fight him. Can't pry his fingers loose from my mother's neck, from Loretta's neck, because everything's mixed up and he's doing the same thing to Loretta Lee he did to my mom, choking the life out of her. And he's got that same cold killer look because he wants her to die, like he wanted Mom to die, and nothing else matters except what he wants. I'm there in the dark, pushing at him. The light catches her eyes and I can see her looking at me. She's so far away, like I'm 4 years old again, peeking out from behind the bedroom door and running to bang my little fist at him while the light fades from her eyes. I can't get him loose of her, so all I do is keep screaming, "I know you killed her. I saw you. I saw you do it. You killed her, and I'll never forget. Not ever." Finally, he kind of jerks his head, and I can feel him looking at me and his hands open. Loretta slips away, and I can hear her breathing like a broken bird in the cellar dark. "What?" he says, reaching for me. "What did you say?" "I saw you do it," I say. "I saw you kill my mother." "You weren't but 4 years old," he says, and now his big hands are starting to curl around my neck, except he's holding me soft. I can feel his heart beating and his cool breath on my face. It makes me want to fall asleep. "You can't possibly recall that event," he says. "You think you can, but you can't." "I can," I say. "I do." "That's the poison they put in your mind, boy. They brainwashed you into thinking you can remember." He's pulling me closer, holding me soft by the neck, and now I can feel his pulse in my hands. "They never talk about it," I say. "They don't have to, because I can't ever forget, no matter how much I try." "No," he says, and his face feels close. I can feel the heat rising off of him. "Impossible, you can't." "You were wearing your brown corduroy trousers," I say, talking so fast it makes me shake inside, "and the black t-shirt with no sleeves, and I tried to stop you and I couldn't, and you carried me back into my room and put me to bed and told me I was just dreaming. You locked me in the room and I ran to the window and broke it with my hand and started yelling for someone to come and help Mommy." My father sighs and says, "Lord, I wish you hadn't done that, boy. It cost me years." "They caught you, Daddy, and they put you away forever, except you fooled them and they let you go." "I have to clean this up," he says, like he's talking to himself alone. "I have to clean this up and get out of here." And that's when his hands start to tighten hard and fast around my neck. I'm trying to fight him, but I'm so small and weak, and he's so big and strong, and you can't stop him. No one can stop Killer Kane. He squeezes and squeezes and squeezes. I'm in this faraway place, falling backwards, real slow and dreamy, when I hear a window breaking. Then a small, faraway voice is saying, "Put your hands up, villain!" And I'm really falling, and the air's coming back into my lungs so fast it hurts. I'm lying there, all crumpled up sideways. I can see Freak. He's rolled down through the cellar window into a pile of coal, and he's trying to stand up. "I'm warning you," he says in that fierce, bold way he has. He's got a squirt gun, one of those big blaster models that holds about a gallon of water. Killer Kane's looking at me. He's looking at Loretta all crumpled up moaning, and he's looking at Freak. Then he shakes his head and goes, "I know a real gun when I see it, you little monster." He makes a move, reaching out. Freak scuttles back a little ways, but he can't really run, and even if he could, there's no place to go. "This is your partner in crime," Killer Kane says to me. "I guess maybe you are a retard after all." Freak is pointing the squirt gun right in his face and saying, "Guess what I got for Christmas, Mr. Kane?" Guess right, because your life depends on it. Killer Kane doesn't say anything. He's just reaching out real slow because he knows that Freak can't get away. "This squirt gun," Freak says, "and a chemistry set. That's what I got for Christmas." Killer Kane just looks at the squirt gun. He shakes his head like, who are you kidding? Sulfuric acid, Freak says, raising up the gun and sighting along the barrel. Good old reliable H2SO4, an oily, colorless, corrosive liquid used in dyes, paints, explosives, and many chemical experiments. Killer Kane says, you're lying, kid. You can't fool me. And that's when Freak squeezes the trigger and sprays him right in the eyes. Then Killer Kane is screaming in this high, scared voice. His hands are scrubbing at his eyes, and it's like the scream wakes me up. Because the next thing I know, I've got Freak in my arms, and I'm running through the dark for the stairs, running as fast as I can on feet I can't even feel. Go! Freak's yelling. He's right behind you. Go! I can't look back, but I can feel him, feel the icy cold breath of him on the back of my neck, and the hands reaching blind to grab me. And I'm going up those stairs. I'm just flying. The steps are breaking under my feet, and he's howling in rage behind me, his hands scrabbling at my ankles, and just for a second he has me. I kick loose, and then we're up on the first floor, bursting out of the cellar hole. I can see the daylight coming through the boarded up plywood, and I cover Freak in my arms and dive right through the plywood. Wham! The sunlight blinds me, and we're skittering, rolling through the clean, cold snow. Hands are grabbing at me, and I'm fighting to get away. Easy, a voice says. Take it easy, kid. You're okay. Iggy Lee. He's looking down at me with red eyes, and you can see where he's been chewing at his beard. I'm sitting there in the snow, squinting up at Iggy and all these cops. There must be 1,000,000 cops, and Freak's laughing like a maniac, saying, "It worked! He fell for it!" Soap and vinegar and curry powder worked like a charm. I don't understand what he's talking about right now. It's only later that I figure out there wasn't any real acid in the squirt gun. It was soap and vinegar and curry powder that made Killer Kane think his eyes were burning up. Killer Kane, who's still rubbing frantic at his eyes and begging for help when they bring him up and put handcuffs on him to shove him in the back of a police van. All I've got room to think about is poor Loretta, and that's what I'm telling the cops, that she's down there in the cellar. I'm afraid that no one's listening, but they must be, because right away they're bringing her up out of the cellar, and Iggy's running to her and crying out her name. She's still breathing, somebody says. Then Graham is shoving through the crowd of cops, and Grim is right behind her, and Gwen is there too, and everybody's making these big, sloppy, fussy things, especially Graham, who's hugging me so tight I can hardly breathe. The fair Gwen is hugging Freak and saying, "I told you to stay in the car. Didn't I? Didn't I?" Freak, he's looking over her shoulder at me, looking over Graham's shoulder, and he gives me the thumbs up as she carries him away. "Freak the Mighty," he says. "Freak the Mighty strikes again." Chapter 21, The Accident of Nature. We all of us had to go down to the police station, of course, where they took a bunch of pictures of the bruises on my neck, and then they insisted I needed x-rays. So we had to go over to the hospital and get that done, and then go back to the police station again, which wore on my nerves almost as much as being kidnapped. Grim, the second time we go to the cops, he's sitting there in the room with me waiting, and he says, "I can't tell you what it felt like, coming up out of the basement and seeing the double track of footprints in the snow. I knew it was him. I knew it in my heart." He kept insisting that Graham go home, which she finally did, because we were at the police station for hours more, me telling all about it over and over until I thought I would faint dead away if one more person asked me what happened after I woke up in the dark and was stolen from my own bed. Grim, he just keeps patting me on the arm and saying, "This is important, Max. Maybe this time they'll lock him up for good." And that's what everybody keeps saying, that this time they've got Killer Kane where they want him, in violation of parole, in violation of a restraining order, abduction of a minor, 2 counts of attempted murder, me and the heroic biker babe, which is what the papers took to calling Loretta Lee. The word is she's hurt pretty bad because he cracked a bone in her neck, but she'll be okay in the long run. Iggy, when I saw him that time in the hospital waiting, he was chewing a hole right through his beard. He was so worried, and it made me think maybe he wasn't such a bad dude after all. It all goes to show, like Grimm says, that you can't always judge the book by the cover. It turns out to be a pretty weird Christmas vacation, as you might imagine, and Graham keeps fussing over me and won't let me sleep in the cellar anymore. "I don't care if he is under lock and key," she says. Grim, he says, "Please humor the woman. She's worried about to death," and so I sleep upstairs on the fold-out, and at night Graham keeps checking to see if I'm there, which is a pain, but she can't help herself, and anyhow, I'm just glad not to be alone in the down under. Freak, well, the fair Gwen just about threw a fit when she got him home, because of him disobeying a direct order and sneaking away to rescue me, but after a while she calms down, and all she does is just look at him and shake her head. What am I going to do with you, she asks. Put me up for adoption, he says. I want to go live with the Waltons. He means the TV show that keeps repeating, and of course he's teasing her, but the fair Gwen is not amused. No more crazy adventures or dangerous quests, young man. You have to be careful, she keeps saying. Extra careful. She means the trouble he sometimes has catching his breath because of the way his insides keep growing faster than his outsides, which haven't grown at all. Freak goes into the medical research place every few months now, which he says is really a pain, not that it actually hurts. Dr. Spivak says my unique status is marvel of genetic aberration, and it makes me an object of intense curiosity, he says in that lofty way of his. Specialists from the world over are familiar with my case. What about the secret operation? I ask when the fair Gwen can't hear us. The one where you'll get a robot body? Freak gets this very cool scientific look on his face, and he always says the same thing. The bionic research continues, my friend. The work goes on. I don't know why I keep asking, because it gives me the creeps. You'd think I could be as cool as Freak about the idea because it's him that's going to get a new bionic body. But just thinking about it makes me want to jump up and run around. I keep telling Graham that when Freak is in the hospital for his tests, I shouldn't have to go to school because we're like a team, but she doesn't buy it. I know Kevin's been a great help to you, she says, but you've got a brain of your own, haven't you, dear? Yeah, right. The other thing about school that's different after Christmas vacation is how jealous everyone is that we got our pictures in the paper and on local TV. Mrs. Donnelly in English calls us the dynamic duo, and she puts a cutout picture from the paper on the bulletin board. Wouldn't you know, some goon put mustaches on us the very first day. Freak says he looks cool with a mustache and he can't wait to grow one, and he makes Mrs. Donnelly leave the picture up. Me, I'd just as soon forget about the whole thing. I really hate the idea of having to testify at the trial and tell what really happened, but everyone says I have to if I want him locked up for the rest of his life, which I do, especially after what he tried to do to poor Loretta, who was only trying to help me. They can't make you if you don't want to, Freak says. A son doesn't have to testify against his father. Grim thinks it'll do me good. Plus, he's really worried he'll get off again, fool the jury by quoting from the Bible. Grim worries too much. Everybody worries too much, Freak says. The way it finally turns out with Killer Kane, Freak is right, because just before the trial is supposed to start, I've got my fingernails chewed down to the second knuckle. Grim gets his telephone call that makes him punch his fist in the air and go, yes! Yes! What happened, they made a deal, and Killer Kane pled guilty, which means he has to serve out the rest of his original sentence plus 10 more years. He'll be an old man when he gets out, Grim says. He'll be older than me. That should make me happy, but instead I feel really weird and worried, and Grim, who still thinks he knows everything, says I just have to get used to the idea. That man is an accident of nature, he says. All you got from him is your looks and your size. You got your mother's heart, and that's what counts. The weird thing I keep thinking about, what if something happens when I get older and I turn out to be another accident of nature? Grim sees me thinking about that one night before bed, and he sits on the edge of the fold-out and says, things will make a lot more sense when you finish growing up, Maxwell. Now sleep tight and don't let the bed bugs bite. Grim means well, I know that, but sometimes he says the numbest things because it's growing up that worries me. Chapter 22. Remembering is just an invention of the mind. Spring has sprung, Freak says, and so are we. This is the day school gets out, and we're taking the long way home. By now I've been carrying him around on my shoulders for almost a year. We call it walking high, and even if we haven't been going on any dangerous quests lately, so the fair Gwen won't have to throw a fit, Freak hasn't exactly given up on slaying dragons. The world is really and truly green all over, he says. Do you remember what it used to be like back in the Ice Age, when glaciers covered the earth and the saber-toothed tiger roamed the frozen night? No, I say. How could I remember that? I wasn't even born. Don't be a pinhead, he says. Remembering is just an invention of the mind. I go, what's that supposed to mean? It means that if you want to, you can remember anything, whether it happened or not. Like I can remember what it was like in the Ice Age. I kept trying to invent stuff, the wheel, central heating, indoor plumbing, but the Neanderthals were happy just with a campfire and a fur coat. If you guess that Freak has been reading a book about the Ice Age, you're right. He's been seeing saber-toothed tigers behind every bush, except that so far all of them have turned out to be stray cats. Or once it was a skunk, and it was a good thing I can run faster. We'd have to soak in tomato juice, which is the only way to get rid of skunk. Inventing electricity would be tough, he says, without copper wire and magnets, but I could handle inventing a compass. All you have to do is rub the needle. That way, everybody could head south and get away from the glaciers. First, you need to invent a time machine, I say, so you can go back and give all the cavemen a hard time about indoor plumbing. Freak goes, you don't need a time machine if you know how to remember. Which is something I'll always remember. Him saying that and me trying to figure it out. Freak's birthday is a couple days after school gets out, and the Fair Gwen has already made it clear he's not getting a ride in a space shuttle. 13's supposed to be extra special, he says. The least you could do is get my name on the list. How about a linear accelerator, just a small one, so I can split a few atoms? The Fair Gwen goes, I suppose this means you're going to be an obnoxious teenager. The deal is, this is really 2 birthdays for the price of 1, because Freak the Mighty is almost a year old. Talk about a prodigy, Freak says. 1 year old and he's already on his way to 9th grade. The Fair Gwen just rolls her eyes when we talk like that. Freak says we can't expect her to understand because you can't really get what it means to be Freak the Mighty unless you are Freak the Mighty. Anyhow, the party is just a family affair because Freak isn't supposed to get overexcited, which is like saying the moon isn't supposed to go around the earth. Last year, I got the ornithopter, he says. This year, why not a helicopter? A real one, though. You can't expect a teenager to play with toys. Why not a jet plane, the Fair Gwen says. Cool, Freak says. A Learjet. What he's really getting, and I've been sworn to secrecy, is this new computer, the one he's been drooling over in his computer magazines. It comes with a modem, which means if he has to stay home for some reason, he can go to school over the telephone. The idea is that I'd be there in the classroom with a matching computer. The only problem is, I don't know squid about computers. You'll learn, the Fair Gwen says. Kevin will teach you. But why would he have to stay home? I ask her. We're out in the kitchen, and she and Graham are frosting the cakes, and Freak is hanging out the living room window, acting as if he intends to have a party every day the rest of his life. Maybe he won't have to stay home, the Fair Gwen says, and she and Graham kind of lock eyeballs for a second. That's secret code mothers have. This is just in case, Max. I think maybe he'd already guessed about the computer, he said. That's why he's jerking your chain about the space shuttle ride in Lear jets. I'm not surprised, the Fair Gwen says. You can't keep anything from Kevin. Freak hardly touches his supper. He says he's saving his appetite for cake. And finally, we're all done eating except for Grim, who keeps rubbing his belly and rolling his eyes and telling the Fair Gwen what a genius she is with fresh peas and new potatoes and salmon, and I'll have just a smidgen more, thanks, until finally Graham clears her throat, smiles at Grim, and apologizes for him being such a pig. The funny thing is, when at last they do bring out the cake, Freak asks me to flame out the candles while he makes a wish, and then he doesn't even touch his piece. He sort of just pushes it around the plate. I figure he's so excited about getting the new computer he's lost his appetite. Not that he's letting on he doesn't feel good. He's acting just as wise and smart-mouthed as ever. I should have asked for earplugs, he said, when we're done singing Happy Birthday. You better check the glassware for cracks. Hush up, the Fair Gwen says, or we'll give you another chorus. When she brings out the computer, he acts so surprised and happy. Maybe he really is surprised. Right away, he wants to turn it on and show off what a brain he is. And because it's his birthday, we all have to sit there and admire him and go, amazing and fantastic and Kevin, how did you know that? And so on. He's showing Grim how to play 3D chess, and just watching that makes me dizzy. So after a while, I go to the kitchen and help clean up, which is something I'm good at. Maxwell never breaks a dish, Graham is saying. He's very sure-handed for someone so large. We're almost done putting stuff away, wiping the counter, when Grim shouts from the other room. All he says is, Kevin! But we can tell right away that something is wrong. We run in, and Freak is leaning back in his chair, making this wheezing sound, panting real fast, and his eyelids are flickering. He's having a seizure, Grim says. Call an ambulance. The Fair Gwen is already on the phone. I run out in the street and start waving my arms and jumping up and down so they'll know where to stop, and I keep running back in the house to check on things, but the Fair Gwen says there's nothing we can do except to wait. All right, so that's the end of the 3 chapters. So you need to go back to the Google Slides and answer, I think there's about 12 questions, okay? Make sure you use the ACE method, which means your answers should be 2 to 3 sentences each.